I'm absolutely delighted that Linda volunteered to do this. And I'm just going to turn it over to her, and it's all yours. We're going to be muted so that we can't inadvertently interrupt her presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. Can you see my slides?
Not yet.
Oh, wait, there's a secret button. Where is the secret button?
Bottom and share screen.
The word share doesn't appear. Oh. There's no, yeah, there's. Yeah, there's no share screen button right now. I'm just looking at my slide.
Take your cursor and put it down to the bottom of the screen.
Mm-hmm. It's down there, and it's just a black bar.
Well, it was there before, and I bet it's still somewhere there.
Should pop up.
Let's see.
Make sure you're clicked on your Zoom window and not the presentation windows.
Okay. Excuse me, everybody. Let me figure out what I'm doing wrong here. Come on. Okay, share screen. There, let's try that. There, we have it.
That's it.
You're seeing something? Okay.
They're seeing it. It's not full screen yet. But
yeah, it's coming. Okay, there we go.
Great.
Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time to join me tonight, and happy St. Patrick's Day from, I say this in honor of my mother, Mary Janet O'Neill, who celebrated March 17th with a fervor. So I'm going to talk about one leg of a little trip that I took in the fall. I was gone for 4 weeks, and I was there for part of October, November. And I retired about 4.5 years ago, and I had been planning, my plan had been to take a trip to Bhutan, and then COVID intervened. And then I was planning the trip to Bhutan as Bhutan opened up just in the fall. And then a close friend of mine from my youth, from the days when I was in the Peace Corps in Morocco in the 70s, was working in Madagascar as a retired person, but consulting with the Peace Corps. She spent her whole life working in international women and girls education. And so I thought, well, shoot, as long as I'm going to go to Bhutan, I might as well leave a couple weeks early and circle the globe and stop in Madagascar. So I did, to visit my friend Megan for one night before she had to leave to go out of town. And then I continued by myself until I went through Madagascar, Thailand, and then Bhutan. But we're going to talk about just the Madagascar piece of it tonight. And there we go. Okay, so and I'm not a graphic designer, and I will be sharing information that I've collected about Madagascar, but know that I'm not an expert on almost anything that I talk about, but a few things. So it was a long trip to get there first. And so I went from St. Louis to Toronto to Addis Ababa to Antananarivo, which is the capital of Madagascar. And that took about 35 hours or so, because there was a lot of layovers. And of course, it started inauspiciously. I had a 6 a.m. flight to Toronto. So I booked an Uber for 4:15. And they weren't there at 4:15, and it's 20 degrees and there's some flurries out, and I'm standing out on Lyndall, which is the street I live on, and in the dark looking for an Uber. That's 4:30, they don't show up. And so I started frantically dialing Lyft, and I got somebody who actually, I think, drove in his pajamas to pick me up, and I got there in time. So after that, everything went just fine. But I spent a couple days in Antananarivo with my friend Megan. You'll meet her in a minute. And we looked at, she showed me around Antananarivo, which is not particularly a very interesting city for a number of reasons. But so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. I'll show you some images of it. The interesting things that places that I visit came after I left Antananarivo. So here's some highlights, and you'll see it's a spectacularly beautiful country with a very, very difficult history in a lot of ways, like many tropical island former colonies of particularly France have seen some hard times, and that's still evident in Madagascar today, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So just where is Madagascar? We've all heard of it our whole lives, but a lot of people haven't visited it. This was my first trip. So it's off the coast. You can see on the slide on the with the blue water that it's off the coast of East Africa. And it's it's near Tanzania. Near is relative, but you see where on the bottom right of that blue diagram it says France Reunion. So the island of Reunion is a very close island, and it's about a 90-minute plane ride. And what I had not anticipated, or I should have, is that as a former French colony, there would be most of the visitors there would be French because it's so close, and they travel from Mauritius and from other places. But it's a big destination for a lot of French people, and for very good reason. Now, when you look on the right, you see the map of Madagascar. So it's a big island. It's the 5th biggest island in the world. And it took a long time to get to. So it struck me once I landed in Addis Ababa that I had to go another 2,000 miles south from Addis Ababa to get to Madagascar. I mean, it's the length of the African continent is huge, and this is not a quick flight. And I had that's why it took so long. But it just, the scope of Africa every time I visit continues to amaze me. So let's see, come on. Advance, please. There we go. Okay, so let me give you a little overview. So it's the 4th or 5th largest island in the world, depending on who you ask. And after Borneo, which I did not know was so big, Greenland and New Guinea has an area of 226,000 square miles. So don't think of Madagascar as a tiny little country. It's quite big, and its history is interesting when you take the long view. Millions and millions of years ago, it was connected to both Africa and India before it started breaking away. What I found interesting is that a number of the people that I struck up conversations with in Madagascar told me that they don't think of themselves as Africans. They think of themselves more as Asians, and their language is Malagasy. And a lot of words from Swahili and other languages that are fairly close to them on the African continent, they appear in the language. At least I understand Arabic, and Swahili has a lot of Arabic in it. But their language Malagasy doesn't seem to have incorporated a lot of French. And maybe it had, and I just wasn't there long enough. But I was there about 8 days, but I wasn't there long enough to really discern that in a significant way. 27 million plus people, most of whom, are younger, on the younger side. And there's 20 different ethnic groups, which is pretty interesting when you think about how you make a society work. Now French is the second language and English is the third. And it's very easy if you're an English only speaker, it's very easy to find your way and to get help and all that, because like a lot of former French colonies, they very much value tourism for its economic benefits. First humans came from Borneo, and Africans came 500 years later as the land masses changed. And so cultural heritage from Southeast Asia, India, Africa, Middle East. So it makes it a really interesting country in terms of food, in terms of language, in terms of music, in terms of art. I found a lot of things that made it a fascinating place. 3,000 miles of coastline, 250 separate islands. You can't see that on that little map I have on the right. And I couldn't get a map that really adequately represented that. Some of the islands are tiny. They have 5 homes on them. Some of them are quite big. What's interesting is that it's a country that's not easy to get around. You leave the main island, Antananarivo, and you go to Nosy Bay, which is the biggest island off the coast in the north. And it's set up for tourism, but you can't, I wanted to go to the south because I wanted to go hiking in some of the beautiful parks down there where the hills are higher, but I couldn't, it takes 2 days to drive there, and there's a very limited number of plane tickets. So if you go there, you have to buy them way in advance, especially I was there in October, and it's a big part of the tourist season. So I couldn't even go to see the south of the country. 2 days each way just would have killed my trip. And it's mountainous and not very well developed in terms of the travel infrastructure. So, but the coastline is magnificent, and it's absolutely worth seeing. It's a stunningly beautiful place from many perspectives. So ecology, it's characterized by lush rainforests next to tropical dry forests, plateaus, and deserts. And what's unique about Madagascar is that it's unique. Most of its, or I should say many of its plants and animals are unique to the island. They're endemic to Madagascar, which doesn't happen very many places in the world. At the same time, there's threats to the ecology that from modern life. Weather, it's temperate, it's dry, mid-October, hot and rainy November to April, but it's a great climate for growing certain kinds of things. I brought a lot of Madagascar vanilla beans back and distribute them to a lot of family and friends. It's one of the poorest countries in Africa, with 2/3 of the people living below poverty. 80% of people's jobs are in agriculture, which are not high-paying jobs, as we all know. Average salary about $500 per person. And one of the issues I'm very interested in is childhood malnutrition, and more than half of the kids are malnourished. And according to UNICEF, they expect 11 million. Remember, it's only there's 27 million in the country. 11 million are in need, are like desperate need of humanitarian assistance. And what is one of the main things that drives the economy is tourism. And there's only about 200,000 jobs for 27 million people. So if you get a job in tourism, you're pretty lucky. You live in a fortunate place, but it's that's not available to everybody, because not every place on the island, and it's all the islands, are appealing to tourists. Religions, it's pretty diverse. 52% practice their indigenous religions, and then there's the French influence, of course, resulted in a lot of Christianity and a few Muslims. So they produce 60% of the world's vanilla. As you may, if you're a baker, you may know it's considered very high quality vanilla. I happen to be, my hobby is making artisanal ice cream, and I make a lot of flavors with Madagascar vanilla. Coffee, they grow coffee, they have cloves, they have other things too, but in terms of exports, those sort of high-end things like spices are where they make some money. They also grow, what are they called? It's the flower and perfume, ylang ylang, Y-L-A-N-G, and I saw that growing all over. I don't recognize it, but everybody, they bragged about it because they're very proud that they've turned that into a big industry. They are rice eaters. They eat rice for every single meal, and sometimes that's all they have in their meals. And that's not so unusual for a country with the level of poverty that they have. And Madagascar is not a Malagasy word. It actually came from Europeans in the 15th century through a sort of people mispronouncing what it was actually called, and I can't pronounce it, but just FYI. So the plants, they specialize in growing also patchouli and ylang ylang, and then turmeric too, pepper, cinnamon, cloves. It's a former French colony. They declared their own independence from France in 1960. France had taken over, I think, in 1896. There was a Malagasy revolution in the late 50s where they tried to secede from France, and it took about another 10 years before they were able to separate themselves entirely. And of course, we know that there's a cost that can be calculated what colonization did to a country. And Madagascar, I suspect it's particularly stark because you see the forests are, the deforestation is incredibly important and dangerous. They, lands are being taken out of productive agriculture because they've been overworked. I think is probably the easiest way to say that. And I'm no expert in agronomy, but I know what I saw from the sky and I saw on the streets as we, drove around the islands. 3,000 miles of magnificent coastline, and which makes it very interesting. And there's a few other things too, in my mind. So one of the reasons, here's why I came. This is my friend Megan, and I came to visit her because I hadn't seen her, and we used to live 35 miles from each other in Morocco in the 70s. And I'd seen her maybe 2 or 3 times since then. And so that was my big treat. But you see it flying in, that's what the Capitol looks like. It's not particularly interesting. There's not a lot of museums or historical buildings. Partly, I suspect, because it has unfortunate geography, like a lot of tropical islands. The one I'm most familiar with is Haiti, but in terms of having huge weather problems. And so they'll get 3 to 4 cyclones every single year, and it results in significant devastation, just massive impact to the country. So they're continually trying to catch up. What infrastructure they have is often damaged by the cyclones. So Antananarivo, it's a capital city, so there is a very large contingent of professional people working to keep the country going, and they coexist right next to slums. And you see that in a lot of countries that aren't very westernized, but it was very stark right in the capital city. There are bodies of water like the green one on the upper left, which look not fit for humans, but I saw people bathing in them. It's a tropical temperature, so there's beautiful flowers. There's jacaranda, one of my favorite plants to see when I leave the Midwest. And so there's beautiful flowers everywhere in the capital city, and to a certain extent out on the islands too. But you also see both sides of the continuum of the economic spectrum. And I was shocked that one person I saw quite a bit when I was there, American tourists, didn't bother to match her shoes. And okay, that was me. I until I pulled them out when I got there, I didn't realize I packed 2 different shoes. So I embarrassed my friend Megan. Said the girls are laughing at you on the street. Said, yeah, I better get used to that. I'm too cheap to buy new. So that's me trying to ruin people's expectations for well-dressed Americans. So anyhow, so I left Antananarivo, and I flew to the first island, which is Nosy Bay, Nosye. And Nosy just means island, bay means big. So this is the biggest island outside of the main one. And you fly on a tiny little prop plane, and you land in a jungle where there are houses right next to the runway. So you sort of take a deep breath and you drop, and it's like one of those old Harrison Ford movies where they're in another country. It very much felt like that. And the flights are almost always full, because that's the only way to get out to the islands. I know there are some boats, but the islands are big, and that's not a very efficient way to travel. So I rented a small room at a kind of a motel that was on the top of a ridge, and it cost $38 a night. And there was a bathroom, and it was there's no air conditioning, but this was October. And there was a lovely young woman who ran the place, and there was a horrible old woman who was in the room next to me, who was a French trumper. And every morning she played loudly. I thought she was in Zoom calls every morning for business. She's a CPA. But what she was doing was listening to right ring radio and talking back to it. I thought she was in meetings. And I listened to that for 5 days. But an anti-vaxxer who tried to convince me that George Soros invented the COVID vaccine in order to own the entire continent of Africa. Seemed a little implausible to me, but we decided not to be friends. And anyhow, but you'll see, this is why I love this place. This was my view from right outside my door, and it's just magnificent. The Indian Ocean is beautiful in every manifestation that I observed. So we're up on a ledge, not a ridge, rather, not a huge one, and at the beach down below there was a resort and a restaurant and that kind of thing. We had music at night, and it was a very popular beach. There were people there. There were artists all over, and so it was an interesting place to be. But I went. I wanted to see. I love beaches, but I really wanted to get into see some of the countryside and a little more. I wanted to leave. I didn't want to just stay in the same place. wanted to see more. So I started visiting islands from Nosy Bay. So I could go right down to the beach and charter a boat. There were actually tours all the time. And I visited maybe 6 islands. And there are nature preserves, there are tiny islands, there's larger inhabited islands, and some with many generations of Malagasy who live there and who maintain their traditions. And I found it was, I mean, there were people who'd been living in thatched huts for as many generations as they could remember on the beaches of some of these islands. And I imagine making a living was very difficult. They would sell little items, or they would, if they could grow something on their island, they would often try to sell, fruit or snacks kind of thing. But the climate in all the islands wasn't conducive to doing that in a big way. But it was part of what Madagascar is. So when we would go to the islands, we'd go on a boat, and when I say we, there would always be 10 people or so, sometimes more on the boat, depending on the side. And there were guides who were very well educated in fauna, flora, that kind of thing, and could really tell us what was going on, what we were looking at, which made it really interesting. And so this is one of the islands, and every day we would stop for lunch on an island. And I think to help the local economy, they would cook some local fish for us and some rice. And so that was that was fun. We got to talk to locals, talk to kids when we walked around, and that was part of the appeal. But Madagascar, one of the unique things about Madagascar, it's ecology. And so, like I said earlier, it's reptiles and amphibians, and half of its birds, and all of its lemurs are endemic to the island, meaning they're found nowhere else on Earth. There's large turtles I swam in the water where very big sea turtles were, right there next to me. I saw these kind of turtles walking all over. But what I saw, and I think it's indicative of how the government manages the environment, I saw naturalists many places, taking people on tours, helping people understand what kind of behavior from tourists would help the local ecology and what would not. They were very cognizant of that. Particularly the younger people seemed to really focus on climate change and things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about, but one of the biggest, my favorite animals that I saw was a whale shark. Now I'm from Kansas, so I'm not really, a native in terms of my experience with sharks or whales. And so this was actually the first time that I had been close to whales breaching. And the whale sharks are gentle. They're big, and when they open their mouths are like 5 feet wide, full of sharp teeth. But they keep their mouths open when they swim because they swallow plankton and other fish. They're just continually gulping what's in the water. But they're slow moving, but they're not dangerous to humans. They're not. They're called carnivores, but I don't think they include human meat. They live about 70 years, and they are 20 tons, and they are the size of a school bus. So what's very interesting to me, I hadn't known this before going, is that whale sharks are the predominant type of whales in Madagascar, in the Indian Ocean over there, and they are endangered. So a lot of the people on some of the trips that I took, a lot of them were young people from like the island of Reunion, or actually from the country of France itself. And they take their vacations where they go snorkeling or scuba diving, and they are tracking the number of whale sharks. They would swim alongside them, they would get near them, and they would be doing checks on particular manifestations of their bodily structure. So they could take pictures underwater, and there were identifiable, nuances to many of the whale sharks, because there aren't that many, where they say, oh, I know this is George. And George has this problem. But they would go under the water and they would report all this, and they would do it for 2 or 3 weeks a year, and they've been doing it for a number of years. But whale sharks are population has decreased significantly, particularly in this region, in the Indo-Pacific region. And there's illegal whale hunting, and there's unintentional catching. Sometimes they get caught up in the nets for other fish. I didn't see that in Madagascar, but I probably wouldn't have recognized it if I had seen it, but I don't think I saw anything like that. But it happens all over the oceans because, of course, people who live near the water need to feed themselves, and they put out nets and need to support their families. So, but they're beautiful. So they're big, and they have this sort of polka dot and lined kind of skin. And if the tech gods are good to me, I'm going to show you a little video. I'm that I shot. Let me see if I can do this. If I can get, whoops. Gotta get out of my slides. Come on. Hold it. Okay, I think I have to stop screen sharing and then go get open my video. And then share again.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. All right. All right. All right, so you won't be able to hear, but people are screaming in French. So these are all the swimmers. Now I'm standing in a boat. I'm standing up, and the boat is shaking. You know, it's windy, so my camera work is not the best. So let me know if can you see the blue water?
No, we can't see the video.
Okay, let me figure out.
You have to do share screen again.
Okay, I have to figure out where is. This is the one thing I had trouble with last time, and it doesn't say where to share. Okay, let me try this. We figured it out last time.
If you bring your cursor to the bottom of the screen and kind of move your cursor around, it should pop up.
Okay.
You have to make sure you have the Zoom window selected and not the video.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's it. Now?
Yes.
Okay. So look, and there is a gray, you know, sort of image in the water, and all the snorkelers are going after it, and they're following it. And they're trying to get underwater so they can see it and make some notations or look for whatever their assignment is. And they do this all day, every day for weeks, and they swim. And I had never snorkeled before in my life, and this was my first time. And when then they gave me a mask and putting my head underwater, I could instantly understand why it's tempting. There you go. There, now that is the whale shark, and that is like a 20-ton. It was bigger than the whole boat. They're gentle. They don't attack boats. They don't upend things. And so they come and they're curious. But I thought it just tickled me. It was so exciting to see that in person. I'd never seen that before, and I saw humpback whales breaching too, which again for me was just thrilling. It was very exciting. Okay, and there'll be one more video if I can manage to. Let's see if I can find my slides. Where did they go? I'm glad my kids aren't here. They'd be calling me, putting me in assisted living, at least when it comes to Zooms, and maybe I should be. Where did my slides go? Okay, but before I go back to the slides, I'm going to show you the other video as long as I'm in the right place. So lemurs are also, you know, the only place in the world you find them is in Madagascar. They're fantastic. They look fierce, and they're actually completely delightful. So let's see if we can get this video open. There we go. Okay, so they love, they jump, they cavort with kids, with people. You're not supposed to touch their tails at all, but if you have a little banana with you, they eat right out of your hands. They were lovely with kids. They were completely fun to be around. And so I went to several nature preserves where I got lemurs jumped on me, and that was just a blast. So I recommend that you do that if you can. Now let me go back to where my slides go. All right. What is everything else? Sure.
Linda, we did not see a video with the lemurs.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, shoot. Okay, and now I got to, my slides seem to have vanished. Where do they go? Hold on. There we go. Can you see the slides now? Are you seeing anything?
No, you have to share your screen again.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
There you go.
Yep. Okay, good. All right. So let me go back a little bit. So that what this image is what you were looking, the video was supposed to show you, and it's people jumping in to swim after this gigantic whale shark, and it circles the boat, goes underneath the boat, it comes around a couple times. It's like it's playing with them, and they're following it. And these are all the young volunteers who are helping to track the size of the school of whale sharks in Madagascar, and that's the biggest species that hangs around in those waters right there. But there's also humpback whales, and there's a couple other species as well. But I found them completely delightful, and I could see why it's just seductive to be able to go under the water with your snorkel and look at this beautiful world, and from a different perspective. So some of the animals, there's a number of different kinds of animals that live in the rainforests and jungles of Madagascar. So lemurs are the ones I mentioned before that are all rare. They're vulnerable or endangered, and the only place you find them in the world in which they're in the wild is in Madagascar. So and what I observed is that the government seemed to be very careful in terms of managing the lemur populations. There's a lot of species. Most of them are very friendly, some are not. So they separate them out. They have islands where only lemur keepers or whatever their jobs are can go. But others that are nature preserves for friendly lemurs where people bring their kids. And I was on a number of those, and it's lovely to see them. They're different colors. They have these intense eyes, so they don't look cute. But then you have a little bit of a banana in your hand, and they just jump on you, and they're very responsive. They have some unique wildlife, but they used to have things like giant flightless birds and dwarf hippos. Now I cannot even imagine what a dwarf hippo looks like, but because they're a big island, they have their own species. Lots and lots and lots of interesting and colorful bugs. And then they call themselves the Island of Wonderful Snakes. So I am not a particularly, I don't find snakes particularly cuddly, but none of the species on this island are dangerous to humans. They say overtly. So I walked with trepidation, but was really delighted that I got to hold snakes and see them in the wild and come up really close and photograph them and not be afraid. So this is, they have this kind of gecko that are very unusual looking. And I mean, its eyes, if I had gone in, zoomed in, you'd see their eyeballs don't look like eyeballs, but that's what they are. And so here I am with a boa constrictor. And I was standing actually just behind the camera. There were two snake handlers, and the boa, I had to hold it in the thickest part of its body, and the power I could feel in my hands as it was trying to constrict or move. It wasn't aggressive, but it doesn't want to be held that way particularly, but that's how the handlers carry them around the preserve. So that was something I've never done before, but I appreciated that. There's some more lemurs here. There are all sorts of beautiful owls, and the number of colorful, interesting little insects was unending. They were everywhere, and not in a bad way. I didn't get any bites or anything, but it was really interesting to see colorful bugs out in the forests and the jungles. There were big sea turtles. I saw them underwater. I saw them above water. I saw them on land, and they were everywhere. And they seemed to be plentiful, and people like them. The locals seem to really like playing with them. They seem pretty benevolent. And here's some more geckos, and here's another snake. So I should warn for people who might get triggered. But we did a lot of hiking and going through some of the national parks. You would see there'd be snakes underneath the leaves on the ground, and they were really hard to see. They were very well camouflaged, but they're not dangerous. And so it felt, it didn't feel as frightening as it might if I knew I was walking into, Rocky Mountain National Park rattlesnake. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. So I put some extra lemur pictures in here because there's some kids I invited to watch this who I think like lemurs, and they've read books about them. And so here's some, and see how they like to play with kids. And they would climb all over, and they'd put their little feet on the shoulders of people of all ages, and then they would leap from tree to tree and person to person. So you better watch. They're coming your way if they think you have a banana. And that was fun, and the kids seemed to really enjoy it. And it's just like it's like a playground. So there you go. If you ever want, if anybody wants me to send you any pictures of lemurs, if you want your own, you let me know, and I'll be happy to. If I had seen these without a guide, I would have been kind of nervous about them, about a furry animal jumping from high in a tree onto my shoulder. I might have felt nervous, but the naturalists who work in the parks prepared us for it, told us what to do. And then they would, and if we started doing something wrong, like reach for their tail or go, try to pet their head or their mouth or something, they warned us about that. So nobody had any issues whatsoever. And the lemurs seem to have a pretty good time too, because they can't get enough of the bananas. So the Indian Ocean is really everything in Madagascar. It's what defines the land, of course. It's what brings tourism, and also what brings commerce, and it brings hostilities too, because pirates have been a problem all over the Indian Ocean for hundreds of years. But also it brings traffic that by boats that may have nets and things, and they're trying to capture some of the rare whales illegally. And so that's something that they want you to watch out for. But when you look at this, it's spectacularly beautiful. We spent a day on this island. I watched the tide come in and the tide go out, and the tide's out right now. And about 2 or 3 hours later, it was, it came in. It's delightful to see. And on the islands, commerce goes on. People live in thatched huts. They keep a lot of the boats are handmade. I went canoeing in one of the national parks in a big dugout canoe with, there were 2 of us. And it was, I don't really have a chance to get into hand canoes when I canoe here. In the middle, you see a local statue to the day, 26th of June in 1960, when Madagascar declared its independence, or became completely independent from France. I think that was a big day, but it was a long time coming. And I couldn't get enough of the color of the water and the beauty. It's hot, and there's the white sands, but everywhere you look, there are people. It's not, I'm sure there's some deserted islands. I didn't tour all 250, but they have a beauty that is, almost spiritual in terms of what Mother Nature can deliver for us for existence, but also for visiting. The people were friendly. The areas I went were mostly touristy, but people wanted to know our stories. They wanted to talk to you. They wanted to find out what you liked and what you didn't. And so there was a lot of good dialogue. Yes, fun and boat in one. And some of the boats are motor, but there's a lot of old sailboats too. And so and there as many islands are, there's different parks. There's a variety of parks, but the kind of boats on the bottom, I canoed in one of those, or I paddled rather, from one island to the next, and I watched them take big herds of cattle with big horns in to bathe in the Indian Ocean. And I couldn't imagine doing that back in the US. It seems I would think, how do you control them? How do they not float away? But that's what they do, and that's what they've always done. And I got to watch them do it successfully. So I hope you aren't tired of seeing blue water and mountains, but all the islands, there's, it's a very mountainous country. No, they're not like 15,000 foot peaks, but I bet they're 8 or 9 or 10,000 in some cases. And it is, I just found it to be spectacularly beautiful every way I looked every day. And it'd be hot and it would be dry, but there was always something we're seeing. There were clamshells that were washing up, or stones that were interesting, or plants that I had never seen before, food I'd never seen before. I really liked it. Let's see what else. A lot of old boats like that people use to get island to island. And of course there's storms coming up, and we were there near part of the cyclone season, but we didn't see anything. There was some clouds and some winds and rain, but very, very, very little compared to what it could have been. Wow, here's the I think those are cattle with those big horns, but I was surprised at how few young small men there were with actually, this is only like 1/2 or 1/4 of the whole herd. The island you see in the upper right is pretty normal. So that's when wealthy people build homes in Madagascar, and they have private islands, and that I think is probably key to tourism. I didn't visit any of them. I stayed in my little motel room overlooking here. This is my view overlooking the Indian Ocean. So you can see how beautiful this island was. And I took all the pictures except for the one with the big whale shark that was underwater. I bought that. I downloaded from the World Wildlife Fund because I'm not an underwater photographer, but the beauty is astonishing in every way. And some of the islands are just rocks in the island, but you think, oh, I bet there's something to see. I bet there's history to see if we climbed on those. And we did go to some islands that were uninhabited, but had been recently inhabited. But there's some that were, you're prohibited from visiting. So that's my slideshow. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to Carol.
Well, that was absolutely fantastic. And Louise, I don't know if you want to unmute people so we can express our appreciation.
Everyone can now unmute themselves.
Oh,
Okay,
and I see there's a text message. My daughter, hi Maggie, former Sunday school kid at Ethical Society.
So I assume that there are lots of questions. And since you can unmute yourself, I suggest that we just go into the question.
Raise your hand if you have a question, or put it in the chat. Who would like to go to Madagascar?
Yeah. Linda, can you hear me? This is David Holtzman.
Hi, David. Yes, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I just wanted to comment about the shark, that there is a film, maybe you remember, Life Aquatic, which is a Wes Anderson movie made in 2004.
Okay.
And part of the movie is a search for a fictional shark that they called a jaguar shark. And to me, this fictional shark looks exactly like the whale shark. That,
oh, really?
I think so.
Except that the fictional shark didn't weigh 20 tons, but it really looked similar otherwise.
Well, that's cool. I'll go look for that. I had never seen pictures of it before, but it was beautiful seeing it swimming, and it's kind of a slow swimmer. So there's nothing threatening about it, even though it's gigantic. But it excited me. I'm like, I think this is the first time in my life. I'm 69. It's the first time I've seen a whale breach. I have to move to somewhere. I think I have to move to Maggie. I see my daughter Maggie is watching with my grandson Sully. Hi Sully. Hello. Anyhow, other questions or comments? Did you return to your rental unit every night or spend the night on some of the other islands? No, I use Nosy Bay Island as the center place. And so I engaged for excursions, I engaged boat pilots and everything from there. So that's where that kind of infrastructure happened to be. I know it also is on other islands, but that island happened to have the kind of stuff I needed, the kind of
Like saying hi to
skills
me.
and infrastructure. And actually, I didn't have a kitchen or anything in my room, and the motel had a kitchen, and it's sometimes like you could hire them and they would make meals. But then there were just two of us there for like 3 or 4 nights, and they said, the chef is out of work and we don't have guests, but if you want to hire the chef, she will make you native dishes. And so we ended up with the 3 of us, and we spoke 3 there's Malagasy, French, and English, and we use Google Translate, and we with sitting next to us, and we had this 3-way conversation, listening to the sounds of the Indian Ocean over this delicious fruits and vegetables and fish that she made. And so that ended up being a really lovely way to spend the evenings. So okay, I see there's a couple questions in the chat. Were you able to communicate with the locals yourself? Yes, I could talk in English. Now I can speak a little bit of French, but really and I speak some Arabic, but and sometimes that helps. But English in the tourist areas is they teach it in schools, so it's very easy. Do they import fossil fuels for energy? I'm sure that they must. I can't imagine how they survive in the big city without it, but I don't know. I don't have any. I didn't ask that question or didn't go investigate. Now, it's a long trip to get there from St. Louis. I'm guessing it was altogether maybe 30 hours in travel one way. And from there, I went to, I left Madagascar. I flew back to Addis Ababa and flew to Seoul, South Korea. And then from there, flew to Bangkok. And then from Bangkok, I flew to Paro in Bhutan, and then back, and then had to go back to Seoul, and then went to Detroit and back to St. Louis. So it was lots and lots and lots. I got a lot of reading done on the airplanes.
Did
Yes.
you learn anything about the schooling?
Yes, I think that I learned that they study English, and I met young people who were guides who were really schooled in fauna and flora and that kind of thing, and nature preserves, and that they hadn't studied in school. But I also know that there are very few jobs, and I could see I could see people looking for work every day, people who looked hungry. So there were schools. I saw schools around, and I saw buses taking them, but I don't know who were the lucky ones who got to go to school and who didn't. That was not visible to me as a tourist. So there were a lot. I'm sure there were many kids who were not getting schooled, but also it's a mountainous island with not a lot of roads. It's not easy. It's not easy to get people together. So I would not hold hope that there's a majority getting educated. Yes.
If this has been mentioned by you or known by others, my apologies for repeating, but our St. Louis Zoo is the founding member of a group called the MFG, the Madagascar Fauna Group. And it is a collaboration between many zoos, leading zoos in the biodiversity issues and particularly with lemurs. We send money and staff and have a real investment through the MFG in helping address the environmental issues.
Thank you. I'll go look that up. That would be really interesting. I'd love to hear them talk. Wow. Okay, here's a question from my friend Tony Schneider. Finch, another ex-Peace Corps volunteer. The trip looks amazing. What was your personal highlight? Well, for the Madagascar part, it was seeing whales breach. And what happened on the boat, there were maybe 15 people altogether this one day on a boat, and there were a couple of young people. They said, "Aren't you going to get in the water?" And I said, "Well, I didn't know what to expect, and I've never snorkeled." And they said, "Oh, it's easy." So they gave me a snorkel, and they basically pushed me in the water. It was a little lighter than that. And then they jumped in the water next to me, and they helped me. I couldn't swim fast enough to keep up with the whale. And so they put me on a pool noodle, and they pushed it. And I'm drinking half of the, yeah, you're laughing, Kathy. I'm drinking half of the Indian Ocean because this is too big and it's not working. But the moments when it was not drowning me and I could see under the water, it was marvelous. I loved it. So I came back and I told my kids, Maggie and Martin, I said, "Okay, we're gonna take a big trip with you guys and your kids, and we're gonna go together, and we're gonna go someplace where we can all learn to snorkel and just marvel at the marvelous scenes underwater." So that was, now Bhutan was very different, and I hope you'll come back for the Bhutan part. That was it was a completely different trip, and I'd love to talk about that too. Okay, Esther, since there are so few work opportunities, is there a large number of people leaving? If so, where do they go? I suspect they go to French-speaking islands. They may go places like Reunion, which I think is a much stronger economy and has a much bigger tourist, business, as I understand it. So but they do, and in fact, every country I've ever visited, I always hear about young people leaving. In Bhutan, it's huge, because sometimes the countries without the kind of development that they come to expect when they go on the internet, there's their expectations aren't met for what they can do at home. And I understand how enervating that would be. So you have to assume that they're leaving, everybody, the lady who ran the motel that I stayed at is thinking very seriously about leaving. She's a single mom and with a kid, and got out of a bad relationship, and she wants to go find a profession somewhere else other than running this little motel. So I can't blame people for aspiring, and I hope they're able to find their way. Other questions? Oh, from David and Shauna. I have snorkeled in the Caribbean. It's closer to St. Louis than anywhere in Africa. I've heard that, Shauna. And maybe that's where we'll go, because I can't imagine going on a 35-hour plane journey each way with kids. But Cancun too.
It's also
okay.
easy with kids.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it has to be easier. So yeah, that's kind of what we're thinking. Somewhere in the Central America. But I think I want to take snorkeling lessons here, just because I think I want to be better next time. I want to be ready for it.
Learn, is it? There's not much to learn.
Well, I might be klutzier than you then. Okay. Other questions? Oh, hi, Chuck.
Hi, Linda. That was wonderful. That's very comprehensive, very good pictures. I wonder how you planned the trip. Did you do it because your friend was there?
So that was the impetus. I was actually had planned to see her a year before. I was going to go spend Christmas with her we were going to go to Zanzibar. She was doing a consulting gig in Tanzania. And so I booked a trip to Ethiopia and Tanzania, and we were going to hang out together for about a week and a half. And then two things happened. COVID came with a rebound and was heading up the eastern coast of Africa. And then there was troubles as there often are right now in Ethiopia, that suggested, my friend called and said, "I just got back from the embassy. You don't want to spend any time in Ethiopia." And then so I canceled the trip. So but I had planned this trip for a long time. Bhutan is what interested me for maybe 15 years, because I read a book called The Geography of Bliss. And it was about where people are happy. It was about 15 years ago. And what is it that makes people happy? How can you tell? And so and Bhutan at that time rated #1 as the happy. And I'm sorry to leave Madagascar behind, but Bhutan is at that point ranked #1 in the world in terms of happiness. And what Bhutan has done is they've taken they have made as their national mission what they call gross national happiness, and they measure that, and it's more important than gross domestic product, is the way they talk about it. And I wanted to see if that was real. So I booked a trip, and then COVID happened, so it was on hold. And then it surprised me about a year and a half later. One of my friends who's online, Carol Bartles, and her husband called and said, we want to go see some cranes in a country called Bhutan. Do you want to come with us? I said, I've already booked a trip. Okay. And so they booked the trip too. So we went, and they brought another friend. And so we did that. But that's, I used, so my friend Megan gave me the name of a travel agent at Antananarivo who could figure out the local, it was complicated to figure out the schedules and to even find places to stay, unless you were going to like, the Hilton. There's some big, American hotel that I was familiar with. And that's not, that's not necessarily, I don't mind. We did a few days in a beautiful hotel in Bangkok to sort of recover, but that was helpful. But I wanted a small, more sort of unassuming place and a different kind of experience. And I think I got that, but I had a local travel agent there recommended by my friend, and everything he recommended turned out really well.
So in the killer whales have to come to the surface to breathe periodically. How often did the whale come up and come above the water?
Just when they thought there were good looking people on the boat. I have no idea.
But that's like every 10 minutes, or
I don't think so, but so here's what I observed. Like you'd be watching, and all of a sudden everybody would start pointing, and you would see waves, like white waves on top, and it would be maybe a symbol of plankton or some sort of fish that were in a pool or in a school, I guess. And that's what whales like to eat. So they would splash. And so birds, you'd see birds come down and pick up free meals, because birds are freeloaders, as we know. And then the whale would come after them too. And then that's when I think they would breach. Now I don't think whale sharks breach like humpbacks where they go boom. That's no charge for the sound effects. But so they came around frequently. So there would be somebody, the guy who had the boat that I was on, he stood in the front, and he was kind of a spotter. And then there was another one who sat on top of the roof. I don't know how he hung on, but they could see at a distance. They could see that the whale shark was coming close to the surface, because the scale is so big, and the white dots help you recognize them instantly. So I think they breach frequently.
so you think they're coming up for food more than
So
air.
they continue. Well, I think those are related, but they swim with their mouths open. Very rude, I know, but they're continually ingesting fish and plankton, so they're sucking them in, and that's they don't close their mouths because I guess they don't want to miss a single tasty bit. Bad manners, but they eat with their mouth
You said the whale shark is the largest fish in the world, so I'm assuming that this is actually a fish rather than a mammal, when a whale would be a mammal.
Oh, good point.
It's
Yeah.
not a mammal.
Yeah, Chuck.
I looked it up while we were talking,
Good
and it's a non-mammal.
I can't. We have to go to the zoo and listen to one of those talks and ask that question. I don't really know the answer.
Because I thought the blue whale is the largest animal in the world.
So I'm sure that that's part of the distinction. I'm sure you're right. It makes sense, but it depends. If you need like 10 adjectives to define your uniqueness, it's like I'm from Kansas, and Garden City, Kansas has the world's largest outdoor municipal man-made concrete-free swimming pool. And I always thought, okay, if you need 10 adjectives to describe your uniqueness, it's a pretty small universe that you're sitting in. But there's probably something there. So we should all go back and ask those questions. Who's up? I'd love to go back there. I just think there, and somebody asked about hiking. Who was that? So I was intending to go hiking, but I couldn't get a plane ride down to the park. And if you go online and you look at the mountains in the south of Madagascar, you'll see they're spectacularly beautiful. They have like baobab trees and some, tropical trees. And the hiking is supposed to be great. My friend Megan had done a couple hikes, but my timing, I think I was like at a spring break time, a peak time inadvertently, and I couldn't get a plane down there. So that had been part of the plan. I read guidebooks. That's what I do. I read guidebooks and then pick out from there what sounds interesting to me, and then figure out what is actually available. So who has another big trick? Oh, what's this? It's Carol Bartles. Chocolate. Did you talk about, let's see. Did you talk about chocolate and coffee? I jumped on. Yeah, yes, a little bit. That grows successfully there. They've entered the coffee markets and it's pretty good. And the chocolate is very good, but the vanilla is really stellar. And it's you can buy it all over the island. I bought big, I bought bundles of vanilla beans that were this big around, so, and here they could cost $7 or $8 a piece. And so there they were just pennies, but nobody busted me for well, I didn't buy enough, I guess, that they would have worried. I said, I'm giving it away. Believe me, I'm not selling this. I gave it to people for Christmas presents. So. And one person who shall remain nameless, who's a physician, I gave some to her, and then she brought it back to me, and she thought she was supposed to take a bite out of it. I said, you don't bake much, do you? I said, if you're not, give it back to me, please. Don't bite it. I should have asked if she baked, but anyhow.
Linda,
Great. Yes.
does it ever feel uncomfortable to be a tourist in an impoverished country?
Yes, it does, and it should. And it should. So you have to, if you're humble and you're not flaunting your wealth, right? You're not lording it over people. And one time I went to the island of Bali, and I had business in Singapore, and I did international business for a long time. And so I traveled quite a bit, but I had a long weekend. And I got to this beautiful place that everybody in my office had said, go stay there. And I thought it was full of ugly Americans and ugly Germans. Then, that's just like awful. And so I stayed there 2 nights. It was spectacular, beautiful, but it just is not what I want to learn about a country is how well the Ritz works. Mm-hmm. And so I got on my Let's Go Bali book, and I called a taxi, and I went to check out, and they said, well, where are you going? And I told them, and there was like this hush. What? You're going there? It turned out, I think the hotel room, it was spectacular. I had a private garden. The shower was outside in the garden with walls around it, right? And I had a view of the terraced hills, where the rice paddies were, and mountains. It was spectacular. And I overlooked the Four Seasons, and I stayed in basically what was an early Airbnb, and I had the exact same view, and it cost $20 a night. And I said, no, this is I'm a Peace Corps volunteer. That's where that's more my speed. I want the experience, not the luxury. Well, there's a place for luxury. There's a time and a place for luxury. I don't know. But when I go overseas to countries where there's some that are defined by their lack of resources and malnutrition, I'd rather give the money to somebody who needs help. So. That's what the Ethical Society taught me.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Well, thank you all. It was nice talking to you, and I appreciate you all coming. And
thank you very much, Linda. That was outstanding.
That was fun.
I also want to encourage folks to come in May. It's the third Friday. I can't remember the date, the 19th of May. We're going to have a presentation on Costa Rica that will be very different from the prior presentation we had a year ago on Costa Rica. So it's John Whittier, and I'm very much looking forward to that. I think it's going to be great. So everybody, have a good evening, and thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.